I moved into the Maple Ridge neighborhood thinking it was a dream come true. Beautiful houses, well-kept lawns, and a shared community pool that sparkled like something out of a resort. My kids, Emma and Tyler, were beyond excited. After years of apartment living, they finally had space to run and play. My wife, Sarah, baked cookies for the neighbors and I started mowing our lawn early every Saturday, trying to be the good new family. For the first month, it felt like we had found our forever home. Then came the first letter from the HOA. It wasn't a welcome letter, it was a warning. Your children have been reported for excessive splashing in the community pool. I actually laughed at first, thinking it was a joke. Kids, splashing? At a pool? But the next day, I saw them, 3 HOA board members sitting under umbrellas like poolside judges. At the center of it all was Karen Whitfield, the HOA president, with her oversized sun hat and an even bigger sense of control. She waved me over like a teacher scolding a student. "Mr. Dawson," she said, her voice dripping with fake politeness, "we've had several complaints about your children's behavior. This pool is for quiet relaxation, not playtime." I looked around. Her own teenage son was doing cannonballs off the diving board while blasting music on a speaker. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my tone calm, "they're just kids enjoying the water. They're not bothering anyone." Her smile disappeared. "That's not up for debate. Please ensure they behave properly, or further action will be taken." I went home that day trying to brush it off, but over the next few weeks, it got worse. The HOA fined us for leaving toys near the pool. Then for unauthorized guests when my niece visited. Karen even sent an email suggesting we find alternative recreation since the pool might not be a good fit for our family. My wife cried that night. "Why are they singling us out?" she asked. The truth hurt, I knew exactly why. We were the only non-white family in the neighborhood. They never said it outright, but the looks, the whispers, and the selective enforcement told the story clearly. One Saturday, I took the kids to the pool anyway. I figured if we kept quiet and respectful, there'd be no issue. The moment we stepped in, Karen approached us like she'd been waiting all morning. "You can't be here," she said sharply. "You've been temporarily banned pending review." "Banned? For what?" I asked, trying to keep my temper under control. "For repeated disturbances and non-compliance," she replied, handing me a printed letter. I glanced around, her son was still blasting music. Her friends were drinking wine by the edge. But my kids were the disturbance. Emma, my 8-year-old, tugged on my sleeve. "Daddy, did we do something bad?" That broke me. I took the letter, crumpled it in my fist, and walked away without a word. That night, I stayed up till 3 a.m. reading HOA bylaws, property codes, and zoning regulations. I was an engineer, and I knew one thing: if you understand the rules better than the people enforcing them, you can beat them at their own game. By morning, I had a plan, a big one. They wanted to ban my kids from their fancy community pool? Fine. I'd build something better. Something they couldn't touch, control, or enjoy. And I'd make sure everyone in town knew exactly why. But here's the question: what would you do if a group of arrogant neighbors treated your family like outsiders in your own home? Because for me, the line had been crossed, and revenge was already under construction. The next morning, I woke up with a fire inside me. The kind of anger that doesn't fade overnight, it fuels you. My wife, Sarah, noticed it instantly. "What are you planning?" she asked, half nervous, half curious. I smiled and said, "I'm planning to give our kids a summer they'll never forget." She didn't know what I meant, but she trusted me. She always did. I started by checking my property boundaries. Every inch of it. I called the county office to get a copy of the zoning maps and HOA bylaws. I needed to know exactly what they could control, and more importantly, what they couldn't. As it turned out, The HOA had no authority over what happened in my backyard, as long as it didn't exceed certain noise levels or violate height restrictions. That was all I needed to hear. I went straight to the city council office and applied for a private recreational permit. The clerk raised her eyebrows when I told her what I was building. "You're putting in a water park?" she asked, tilting her head in disbelief. "Not a pool, a whole water park?" I nodded. "Slides, fountains, splash zones, the works. And it's going to be open to everyone, well, almost everyone." Over the next few weeks, I became a man on a mission. I sold some unused equipment from my workshop and took out a small business loan. Contractors showed up, and the neighborhood started buzzing. Curious neighbors peeked over their fences. Karen, of course, was first to march over, holding her clipboard like a sheriff with a warrant. "What is all this noise, Mr. Dawson?" she demanded. "Construction," I said calmly. "For what exactly?" "A personal project." "This violates HOA policy," she snapped. "Actually, it doesn't," I replied, handing her a printed copy of the bylaws. "You see, the HOA only governs common areas and visible structures from the street. My backyard isn't either." She looked stunned. "We'll see about that," she said, storming off. I grinned. I knew she'd try to fight me, but I had already done my homework. The first thing to go up was the splash pad. Then came a twisting slide that wrapped around a fake palm tree. The kids couldn't believe it. Every afternoon after school, they'd rush to the window and watch the construction unfold. "Daddy, is that for us?" Emma asked. "For you and every kid who's been told they don't belong," I said. Soon, word spread. Local families started asking questions. "Hey, Dawson, what are you building back there?" I told them the truth, a private water park. "And when it's done, admission will be free to everyone in town, except the HOA board." They laughed at first, thinking I was joking. But once they saw the water slides going up and the fountains being tested, their smiles turned to awe. Meanwhile, Karen and her HOA minions were losing their minds. They called city inspectors, health departments, even the fire marshal. Each time, the officials came, reviewed the paperwork, and left impressed. "Everything's in order," one inspector told her, almost smirking. "You might want to let the man finish his project." I had every legal box checked. My company license, insurance, safety permits, everything. The HOA had no jurisdiction over private recreational facilities on personal property, especially since I wasn't charging a profit. It drove Karen insane. Then came the day she tried to pull her biggest stunt. One morning, I found a notice taped to my door: "Cease construction immediately pending HOA review." It was signed by her and 2 other board members. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. I walked straight to her house, where she was pruning her roses like she owned the world. "Karen," I said, holding up the notice, "I think you dropped this piece of useless paper." She glared at me. "You think you can mock the HOA? You're setting a terrible example." I leaned closer and said, "No, I'm setting the right one, showing my kids that bullies don't get to decide who belongs where." By the end of that week, the water park was nearly complete. We had slides, sprinklers, a lazy river made from repurposed irrigation tubing, and even a snack shack built from my old shed. Local kids started gathering at the gate, begging to see it. That's when I decided to make it official. I posted a big sign outside my property: "Grand opening of Dawson's Splash Paradise, free entry for all families. HOA board members prohibited." It went viral overnight. Someone took a picture of the sign and shared it online. Within 2 days, hundreds of people commented. Finally, someone stood up to an HOA. "You're my hero. Where is this place?" Karen called an emergency HOA meeting that evening. I watched from my porch as board members filed into her living room, looking furious and desperate. They could glare all they wanted, I wasn't breaking any law. By the weekend, cars lined the street. Families from neighboring communities showed up, bringing coolers and towels. The laughter of children filled the air, the same kind of joy Karen once called a disturbance. As I watched my kids splash and laugh, I realized this wasn't just revenge. It was justice. But Karen wasn't done yet. The HOA had one last weapon to use, and when they brought the city council into it, things took a darker turn. The question is, what happens when power-hungry people realize they can't control you anymore? Because soon, they'd find out that crossing a father's love comes with a price. By the second weekend, Dawson's Splash Paradise had become the talk of the entire county. Families who had never even driven through Maple Ridge were showing up with their kids, lawn chairs, and picnic baskets. The laughter and joy that echoed from my backyard made me feel alive again. Every time I saw Emma and Tyler racing down the slides with their new friends, I knew every late night and every ounce of frustration had been worth it. But for Karen and her HOA empire, it was pure chaos. She stood at the edge of the street one Saturday morning, staring at the line of cars that stretched past her house. Her manicured face was tight with anger, her hands trembling as she dialed number after number. I could hear her voice from across the yard, shrieking into her phone, "This is a violation of every HOA policy. He's destroying our community image." Unfortunately for her, the law didn't care about image. By Monday, she had filed an official complaint with the city council, accusing me of operating a commercial enterprise without a permit. It was her last card to play. The council scheduled a hearing, and I received the notice within hours. Sarah looked worried, but I just smiled. "Let her dig her own grave," I said. The day of the hearing, the council chamber was packed. Neighbors came to watch, reporters showed up, and even kids wore shirts that said Splash Paradise Crew. Karen marched in like she was leading a royal procession, holding a thick folder of evidence. She gave me a glare sharp enough to cut glass before taking her seat. When the meeting started, she wasted no time. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, her voice dripping with false righteousness, "this man has turned our quiet community into a circus. He's running a business without approval, bringing in outsiders, creating noise, and violating everything our neighborhood stands for." The council members turned to me. "Mr. Dawson, your response?" I stood calmly, handing out neatly organized copies of my permits and documents. "Everything I've done has been within the law. I have a private recreation permit, I charge no fees, and every safety standard has been met. The only thing I've violated," I said, glancing toward Karen, "is her sense of control." There was a ripple of laughter through the room. Karen turned red. "He's lying. He's manipulating the system," she shouted, slamming her papers on the table. One of the council members leaned forward. "Mrs. Whitfield, we've reviewed his documents. They're in perfect order. What you're describing sounds less like a violation and more like a personal issue." Her face froze. The room went silent for a moment before people started whispering. Then I decided to end it once and for all. "If I may," I said, pulling out a folder of my own. "Here are copies of the HOA's discriminatory enforcement reports. Every warning letter, every fine, every complaint, almost all directed at my family. I've also included statements from other residents who faced similar treatment. This isn't about rules. It's about selective targeting." The audience gasped. Karen's mouth opened, but no words came out. One of the council members turned to her. "Mrs. Whitfield, this is serious. We will need to review these documents immediately." Her empire was crumbling right before her eyes. A week later, the verdict came in: the HOA had been found guilty of harassment and discriminatory enforcement. They were fined heavily, and Karen was removed as president. Her reputation shattered overnight. The same neighbors who once followed her blindly now avoided her like the plague. She sold her house within months and moved away quietly, her control gone for good. As for Dawson's Splash Paradise, it became more than just a backyard attraction. The city partnered with me to open it to the public officially. It became a community landmark where families could gather without judgment, without exclusion, and without fear of being told they didn't belong. On opening day, I stood beside Sarah as Emma and Tyler cut the ribbon. Hundreds of children cheered as the fountain sprayed and music filled the air. Reporters covered the story, calling it the pool that beat the HOA. Sarah leaned against me and whispered, "You really built all this because they wouldn't let our kids swim?" I smiled and kissed her forehead. "No," I said softly. "I built it so they'd never feel small again." That evening, as the sun set behind the slides and the laughter of children echoed through the air, I saw a familiar figure at the end of the street, Karen, standing beside her car, watching quietly. For a moment, our eyes met. I gave her a nod, not of anger, but of victory. She turned away without a word and drove off into the distance. Revenge didn't come through shouting or fighting, it came through proving them wrong. Because when you take away someone's power to make others feel less than human, that's when you truly win. So tell me, if someone tried to take away your family's happiness just to feed their ego, how far would you go to take it back?